Do you name your device? Like your insulin pump, your CGM maybe? I do. I'm sure some of us do the same. We refer to it as a really bad word, especially when it's beeping and annoying us at 3 a.m. in the morning. But what I have done is I have given all of my devices a gender. I refer to it as a she. So she's annoying me when she's beeping at 3 in the morning, for example. But it has really, really helped me accept having these devices. Maybe you do the same. In this episode, we're going to talk to the creator of this fantastic book, Stephen the Insulin Pump, called Amy. I came across her during social media, and it's an absolute fantastic read. And of course, I had to interview her. So have a listen. Hello, how are you, Amy?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm so great. Thank you for making the time this morning/afternoon for me to be a part of our chat.
Well, thank you for asking me. I'm always excited to talk about diabetes and the diabetes badassery that is in the world.
Absolutely. I think there's something about this world that we are living in currently with diabetes that is absolute magic. For all ages, for anybody surrounded by this world. And it's just incredible.
Well, I have found that my daughter specifically feels so not alone, I guess, with the social media and the groups and things like that, and people showing what living life with diabetes is for real. It's really helped her feel not alone. Because again, like no one in her life has diabetes, has type 1, in her immediate family, I guess. And so there isn't a lot of representation of that or dealing with that, minus what she goes through. So I know that she really appreciates people like you and others that have shared their stories and their experiences.
Yes, let's take a little step back, actually, because I'm aware of this as we've had a little chat before, but our listeners would love to know your connection with diabetes. So would you like to expand a little bit upon your daughter's diagnosis, if that's okay?
Yes, for sure. I am the mother of a daughter who is now 16. She'll be 17, I guess, in June. And she was diagnosed at the age of 7. Yeah. It wasn't something that we had on our radar. It's nothing that anyone has in our family. And as we look back through pictures, we can see that she was struggling quite a bit before we really noticed, which makes me feel really awful. But she was diagnosed in 2015, like I said, at the age of 7. And it'll be 10 years in August.
Wow. That's pretty incredible. And August is only a few months away.
I know. We have her, it's on the calendar, and we usually do something special. She asks for it, but also it's just, one of those things where we want to celebrate it too, because it's not like she's the only one that has it.
Absolutely.
Her father and I do, and her brothers help a lot, but it's a family affair for sure.
Well, it is that sort of ripple effect that it has, obviously amongst the parents, but amongst the siblings. And I'm right to say, is this your daughter?
That is my daughter. That's Natalie.
Natalie, there she is. I love this book. Can I just say that this book I've got loads of Post-it notes in it. But this is how we connected. Steve the Insulin Pump, which has not only been written but also illustrated by yourself. And as a graphic designer / design teacher, this is awesome. This is really, 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 really good.
Thank you.
I just want to pick out a few bits and pieces that I genuinely warmed my heart. Like for me, going onto a pump was difficult. I found the transition quite hard, but actually I wish I had had this book. It's so cool.
Thank you so much.
There was this beautiful part where we introduce, and then it goes on to how the family have reacted to your daughter's diagnosis, which is just gorgeous. I think anybody from a parent to the child or the person who's being diagnosed can relate. But my favorite, which I'll be honest with you, it does make me chuckle many, many, many times. I'll just go to it now, is this one here.
Yes.
And for our listeners, is actually a page where I would say Steve is talking about all of his beeps and his alarms and why he does it. Because he does it, we know he does it, but the reasoning behind it, and it's this bit where she says, she knows I only want to do the best for her.
Yes, I can remember the first time I kind of put the persona of Stephen on her pump. She was showing annoyance, just like the rest of us do, at this beeping, chirping, alarm ringing device that is now really helping you be alive, but it also is this added responsibility. And I remember her sitting there, and again, she's annoyed, and she's like, this is just irritating. I don't want to deal with it. And I was like, just remember, each sound is to, help you. It's to benefit you. It's not meant to be irritating. It's not meant to take you out of your life, but these are bits of information that we need. And that's kind of where the personality started from. I'm like, just remember, like, think of him as a friend. Think of him as a worried companion that just wants you to be safe, that just wants you to be healthy. And that his persona stuck, and we kind of built from there. And I mean, funnily enough, I did not put in the things that we say to Stephen sometimes because they aren't really child appropriate or, family friendly.
Yes.
But just understand that we do talk to Stephen like that sometimes as well, because it is irritating. It does take time. It does turn on at times when you don't want it to. But for the most part, we're really, really grateful that a pump like Stephen will help our baby.
I definitely felt a sense of almost like a pet that you have that's introduced to a new family. Yes. So with Stephen, it's almost like introducing a puppy or, I don't know, a hamster or something, and ensuring that the person that's responsible to look after him fully understands all of his quirks.
Yes. I was talking about the book, or talking about writing it with family members or friends, and it dawned on me, and this is like months after I wrote it, that the voice in it is actually my voice talking to my baby. That that I'm here to help you. I'm here to love you. I'm always with you. And that all I want to do is take care of you. And again, you do have to know some things about me, and you do have to understand what I'm trying to say. But in the end, all I want is the best for you. And again, this is months after I wrote it. I didn't even realize that it was a mothering parent caretaker kind of vibe that Stephen has. But
well, I think he's more of a guardian to a certain degree. And when he's introduced, it's a case of, this is my role, this is what I do, this is why I'm alive in terms of, a figure,
yes.
A piece of technology. And that's the reason why I'm now your friend, because I'm here to help you. And you give me something, I give you something.
That's right.
And that's beautiful to think of a piece of technology as that.
Yes. Again, like there's a lot that diabetes takes. There's a sense of security, there's a sense of safety, there's a sense of concern about the unknown and everything like that. But then there has to be some silver lining, some things that are beneficial, things that make it not so bad. And that's what I thought Stephen and technology really personifies, because there's not a lot we can do when diabetes is diagnosed. You have it until they have a cure, you're stuck with it. And so the hope is that we can find a way to mitigate the hard things, make them a little less, so that diabetes isn't the only thing that you have in your life. That was one thing with Natalie too, that we kind of just said, like, this isn't going to be it for you. You're not just a person with type 1. You're not just a person who has to monitor their blood sugars all the time. That's just a footnote in your life. It's a large footnote, and a footnote that needs a lot of attention, but it's not your defining characteristic. And thankfully for technology like Stephen, it's easier to function as though diabetes isn't the only thing.
And there is, in the book, you talk about, well, she, obviously with your daughter, but towards the end about being a part of a football or a soccer team even. And, just being, there's this one page where there's a bunch of friends and it's sort of like, basically, which one am I? Can you tell the difference?
Yes.
Which is something which I found quite hilarious, but also in a really positive light. Because when I'm out with my friends and, we take a group picture or if we've been on holiday, you can't tell. But in my mind, I'm different. I see the difference. But that was sensational. I love that.
Oh, thank you. And the other thing, too, that we have found that there are people that want to care for you. When we were first diagnosed, it was, mind-blowing, mind-numbing. And I'm like, how will I ever connect with anyone who understands this or who will care about this? And come to find out, people do care. Even if they don't have type 1, even if they have no idea what's happening, when people love you, they also love everything about you. And so to watch my daughter create the community that she has and the connections that she has, Stephen is a character in everyone's life. Her friends will be like, hey, Stephen's talking, or, like when he has to sit out on the sidelines, people are like, Stephen, just be quiet for a little bit.
Yeah.
But Stephen has become this thing. And so as a mom, as my daughter continues to grow and move out and away from me, it's heartening to know that she won't be alone, that there are people that are aware of this, that there are people that care and look for those things. She was doing a function where she had a state function and she had to go down. We live in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and so she's like 25, 30 minutes away from us, and her sensor is acting up, and we'd sent it with her. And so one of her friends was like, yeah, I can do that. So we sat on FaceTime and they replaced the sensor, and it's just like, I just was on a high the whole day, knowing that there's people out there that will help.
Of course. And that's it. It's about the asking and letting people in, because I'm sure because she was diagnosed so young, and as a mum, you were very much cocooning her and looking after her and obviously having a relationship with her school, her teachers, her caregivers. But now she's a teenager. She's going into the world. She'll be going off to college and university, and her life is going to look so different. And having Stephen in control to a certain degree lets her concentrate on just the living,
Absolutely. I remember the first day that I had her blood sugar information on my phone, and I could just pick it up and look at it while I was laying in bed. And again, one of those world-changing moments where I was like, I know, instead of having to, I don't know how many diabetes mom and dads that you've talked to, and maybe I'm just weird, but it's like every time, she's quiet for too long in the house, I'm like, is she gone? What's happening? I don't feel that way so much about my boys. I should, because they do some other ridiculous things. But the unpredictability of diabetes, I'm just filled with that fear. But the technology has made it so that I can see her numbers when I'm states away. I'm across the country. I can still see those things. And as the mom, it makes me feel so much better, because again, I don't have to call her and be like, hey, what's your number? What are you doing right now? I can see it. watch that. I can be like, hey, are you struggling, or things are good? And so it's allowing her to live with the assistance of the tech.
Of course. And like the theme of this season is motivation. So we've looked at things like ambition, resilience, etc. What gave you the sort of motivation to get to this point where we are holding this idea, which is so tangible? So what was the bridge that connects this?
I wish that I had some wonderful story. But Stephen had been, I think, about 6 months after she was diagnosed when we first started on the pump, but it wasn't until maybe 2 years later. And so we had Stephen for 5 years, 6 years.
Okay.
And all of a sudden I was just like, you know what? Stephen would make a really good book. And I'd had some experience in some diabetes community things, and seen some other diabetes books. And, one of my biggest memories is when we were diagnosed. At the time in that August, there were seven families in the diabetes floor, which they said was
Enormous.
a huge number of people. And the ages ranged from, I think there was an 18-month-old, and then I believe there was like a 14 or 16-year-old. And I wish that I had connected with any of them, but I didn't, because I was reeling at the time. But I remember getting a care package, and, later on, as you begin to settle into the norm, there's some things that I wish that had been in there. And I wish a book like Stephen had been in there to, talk about all the things, talk about, what diabetes tech is, but then also to really talk about the emotions of it. It's not skipping down the hallway. Yes, I was so thankful when she was diagnosed because she was horribly sick, and she came back to us, which was wonderful, but it came with all of these strings attached. And you spend time thinking, how will I ever figure this out? How will I continue on? And so I thought a book like the Stephen book would be something wonderful. We have made connections with other people who've been recently diagnosed, and it's been nice in a way for me to hear what other parents think, and and parents have thought very similar things to me. And I'm able now at the place that we are to say, yes, your child can play sports. Yes, they will be able to drive. Yes, they can live very normal-ish lives. Because in the beginning, that's really, really hard to see. And if I can, Natalie and I and Stephen can help people get to that and understand that sooner, or to feel like they're not alone. That's the goal.
I couldn't praise you enough, because it is such a whirlwind. And then learning a sense of technology is also another sort of, well, there's math involved, but especially if you're not very technology savvy, it's sort of like, what happens if I press this button? What if I do this? And it's a whole new language. And the book obviously illustrates it quite humorously, because it does all these things that are important, but it's sort of one step at a time they will come into importance, in a sense.
That's right. I mean, you cannot... I'm thinking of this connection of mine who was recently diagnosed, and it was like, you can't tell them about optimizing pump technology when they're just learning how to count carbs. That's not the time for that. And you can't really dump all the things that could affect blood sugar on them at the beginning, because they might not ever get out of bed, because it's literally everything, right? And so it really is a matter of allowing things to unfold and reminding them that every day they will learn more, they will feel more sure-footed, but you have to be there for every single day of it. Unfortunately, there's no beautiful musical montage in the middle of that where you can, show your growth in 30 seconds rather than 6 months. But in the end, the idea is that you want your loved one, your child, yourself to live a quality life. And what's necessary is to learn as much as you can.
Absolutely.
And thank goodness that there's tech to help with that, especially friendly ones like Stephen.
And with Stephen, the insulin pump, in terms of a publication, have you used it as a learning resource? So have you introduced it to, obviously you mentioned other communities, but how have you expanded that reach?
Yes, I've been in contact with a couple of diabetes groups. There's like the tech companies and then some diabetes educators as well, trying to get it in the hands of people that it's beneficial for. So yeah, that's the hope, to get it into diabetes educators, real people that would benefit from information like this.
Absolutely. Even things like public libraries or however else around that world. And it's just a sense of normalizing this story, but also normalizing the technology. And have you found that people have come up to you, say, in the real world, that have put two and two together and realized that you wrote this book?
Yes, I mean, the wonderful words of, friends and family, and then connections of friends and family who know about the book. And it's, we think that people's lives aren't touched by type 1. And even if it's, well, my friend's cousin's daughter has type 1, for them to be able to make that connection and to know just a little bit more, to pull the curtain back and show what life is like, to have grace for people to understand the weight of the responsibility that people have, is, I think it's important, because diabetes is a heavy weight. It's not a walk in the park. It's not an easygoing thing, and I like people knowing that, because I want them to. When they see my daughter, I don't want them to think, oh, she has type 1, poor her. I want them to be like, look at her.
Yeah.
Look at her go. Look, she has type 1 and look at all the stuff that she does. And I want that for everybody.
That's exactly it. That's where I sort of refer to earlier on with the sort of wave has changed in a sense. There was definitely, I would say, when your daughter was diagnosed, or even before that, even a couple of decades ago, it was sort of like a lot of redundancies, like you can't perhaps do that, or be cautious doing this, or do you think you can fly because of the insulin, or whatever kind of, almost, I'd say, like hocus pocus, very bizarre opinions, God knows from where have come. But now the more awareness in terms of even in the UK, but also the States, around the world, you have well-known people, from politicians to sports to singers to whomever, that are wearing their devices on show. And for a lot of young people that I teach, they've looked at that, or say the Olympics, and thought, okay, I would wear like a strappy top on a non-uniform day to show my device, as opposed to cover it up.
Yep.
So it is shifting to have more wow, you're pretty resilient, compared to, oh, you poor thing, are you okay?
Yes, absolutely. And the representation and being able to see people that wear the devices that have those things is such an empowerment, for people, and not just people with diabetes, people with all different kinds of challenges. And I'm so glad that more people are willing to share those, internal challenges more externally, because the visibility just builds strength for other people. And I'm so thankful that my daughter gets to have that too. And really, what you said too is true, that, it used to be, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. And, oh, it's, I'm not sure. And now when we see it on TV or we read about people, I'm like, look at this. And we're like, hey, look, it's the same sensor that you have or whatever. And look at what they're doing. And it doesn't shock us, but it's nice to see them in the real world, because they are capable. People with diabetes, they are capable of doing anything that they want.
I do feel there's a sense of, especially young diagnosed diabetics that do grow into teens, adulthood, they have this sort of different mindset. So obviously you've got 3 children, but I would have assumed, because I'm biased, that your daughter is more determined.
Well, I don't know. You put them all together, and they, unfortunately, their father and I are like very competitive, and so we're all very competitive. We try to play family soccer or family pickleball, and it's wonderful, except for where there's a lot of arguments about who's winning and if the ball was in. But yeah, there's an extra level of determination on her specifically, because she's not going to be. I mean, she happens to be the only girl, and she's the only girl like on a whole side of the family too. So there's that level, and she's the firstborn daughter. There's a lot of things that give her that extra level, but one of them is to prove that she's capable. I mean, to us and to the world, but to herself, I think too. Which hopefully that's the main one, that she is capable and that she can do it, despite what has been given to her.
Absolutely. And I was just thinking, what's next? So in terms of doing this fantastic book, and obviously, it's international because now you're selling them in the UK. So, there's oceans apart. In fact, I bought one for my school. So my school have one in their library, and I'm hoping to get one in our sort of primary school that's attached to us. So I was just like, let's get it in the curriculum. let's go.
Yes, that would be awesome.
I think it's important. I think it's so. It was also because it reminds the kids of what's happening in the world, But in terms of the book, will there be a sequel? Will there be, I don't know, Steve goes on holiday? I don't know. Like, is Steven gonna go on a flight? Is he gonna go to the airport and there's gonna be drama? That's what I want to know.
That is so interesting. I love those ideas. I do have a Spanish version in the works. A lovely friend of mine has translated it all for me. I just have to redo everything.
Okay.
But I have had an idea about the diabetes police. So we have a family, she's had a phone for longer than people would be like, yeah, that sounds great. But, technology needed that phone. So she's had a phone. And so she has a text chat between, there's Natalie, me, and then her dad. Yeah. And she names it Diabetes Police.
Okay.
So I have a story about the Diabetes Police, the loving but annoying Diabetes Police that are always checking in on her and making sure things are okay. Because as caretakers, that's what we are, and with with her going to college, hopefully, and
yes.
A year or so, the relationship, the process of all of these things is going to be put to the test. How does that work? We've built a life for her where we are involved in changing out sets and changing out sensors and helping her with all of these things because we didn't feel like it was something that we wanted her to carry by herself.
Of course.
And so how will that adjust and change when she's out of the house? But I wanted to write about the diabetes police because, yes, the person with type 1 has a lot of responsibility, has to carry the weight of that. But I would say a really close second place is the parents, is the caretakers.
Cool.
Because there's an element of out of controlness that I'm not sure is felt by the person who has it. And maybe they do. She's still a child at this time, but I can't fix it for her. I can't take it from her. I can't make it better. I can't eliminate it. And to me, that there's this out of control feeling. And so the caretakers, I believe, need to be highlighted as well, for all that they do, not to take away from the people who live with it. But yeah, I mean, it's funny too. She's real snarky to us about checking on her, and as teenagers are, and so her father and I wear the diabetes police badge proudly.
Of course. There'll be a good cop and a bad cop, surely.
I don't know. I think she probably thinks we're both bad cops, but
I think that would be hilarious because when you first said it, I thought you meant the general public that always have an opinion. I thought that was the diabetes police. Like, you know, if you're out and about and someone sees you're diabetic and you order, I don't know, a pastry and they're like, you can't have that because that happens all the time.
oh yes. Well, we just do the thing where like, did you cover that? Did you cover that? Did you cover that? And she's like, ugh. And then of course, like her brothers hear it as well. And so, you know, she'll be eating, minding her own business, and they'll be like, do you cover that? And that does not go well. You know, that is not appreciated at all. So
there's maybe a junior division of the police, which are her brothers. I don't know. I'm just seeing a whole setup right here where they're like the eyes. They're like, you know, like looking over everything that she consumes.
yep. Yes, yes. And again, like you can feel just why she would call us the police, because we are just constantly watching her and monitoring her.
Literally.
And I always tell her, I'm like, it's with love. We love you. And she knows that. But of course, why wouldn't it be irritating and annoying? But so yeah, that's the idea of that. But I do love the idea of Steven going on holiday. That sounds hilarious.
Maybe a policing situation could happen whilst she's on holiday with her friends. I'm just going to set this up.
Yes. I love this. I love this.
Because we've all had horrific incidences at the airport. I mean, there's too much for me to unpack, but it's just like, am I the only one who happens to have this technology in the entire world? Clearly not. But I'm made to feel like I've done something wrong.
Absolutely. And really, like the amount of times that she talks about Stephen going off in a quiet place, or, you know, and talking about policing, like, I don't know if your mother ever threatened to text your friends if you weren't doing what you needed to do, because I've done that. You know, I've been like, I will text them. I will text their mother to get their number, and I will text them to do something if you don't write me back.
Oh, I'm glad I missed that because I was diagnosed when I was 20. So because I was an adult, I missed the that level of care, I would say.
Yes, I mean, but I'm like, technology's there to help me, so I will find your friend's phone number. I'll call your coach. I'll call anybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then she's like, okay, but gotta do what you gotta do.
Oh gosh, but I love to. I wait. I would say I love to wait to see what happens with the sort of series of, well, even like your daughter's transitions into the next couple of years, whatever where she's at, and how even with technology changing, you know, Stephen might become Stephanie. I don't know.
Right? I mean, she's had a couple iterations of this particular pump just because it's, you know, it lasts for certain long, and we've gotten. And it's like we've thought about, like, if we named him something else, and at this time, at least with the brand that we have right now, that's always going to be a Steven. But we have considered, what if you went to this, what would we name it? And right now we're just kind of at a loss, because Steven just really, like, he's been around for so long that he's like a part of the family, and he's like this person. And so, yeah, no, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I'm willing to, you know, live in a world where we don't need Steven.
Oh, yes.
You know, I'm willing to do that.
I would definitely champion that world for sure. I have no idea what it potentially could look like because there's so much research going into this currently, globally as well. So what would your hope be in terms of how we get there? What sort of solution do you think would be ideal?
And you're talking about as like a cure for it?
Cure. This is the magic question, isn't it?
You know, from the reading that I've done, and again, I don't understand everything that has to go into it. I know that autoimmunes are really a black hole mystery at this time, with the number of autoimmunes, the number of people struggling with those, and to know that it's the body that has waged the war, right?
Yes.
I know that they're trying to do everything they can, and in order to fight the body from doing it, they have to then shut down with like anti-rejection or whatever the drugs are that stop the body from doing what the body wants to do. And I don't know if I could snap my fingers and she could just not have to deal with it, I would. Or if I could take it myself. That's what I keep saying, that on the dark days that we have, on the days where she's really hurting because of the weight of this, my only wish is that I could just take it from her. But yeah, I wish that all of a sudden I'd wake up one day and be like, this is how we fix it. This is the puzzle piece that's missing. But I just hope that scientists continue to search and to try.
Of course.
Because that's a world that I would love my baby to live in.
I know. It is tough, especially what you said about if you could take it. I remember my mum used to say that a lot. She's like, if only I could take this from you, then, I've led a life. I can take it, like you're still a child, and a young adult who's growing, etc. But it is such a curious world in terms of the tech is doing so brilliant, but how close are we getting to kind of changing those antibodies into not basically killing our beta cells, which is what makes insulin, really. And that's the sort of missing key at the moment that is the hardest to get to. But I do feel with technology, as it does advance, I believe it's going to become smaller and smaller in terms of, obviously the pump, but the infusion site, for example. And that I definitely think has made life more accessible and easier for diabetics, because we can conceal those technologies better as opposed to, having a big kit with you all the time, or, something that takes over your whole arm. So there are steps being taken in both those parts, but the technology is definitely helping. And I know in the States there's a lot of things about funding, that big dialogue around there, and in terms of healthcare. But the advancements are coming out. It's just about the accessibility as well.
Yes. And it's also trying to find tech that works for you. I've made a bunch of connections with people with diabetes, and it's like this technology works great for me. This technology does not work for me. Sensitivity to skin, just algorithm wise, things like that. And so there is a little bit of a, I don't know if fear is the right word, but, an unknown when you're thinking about changing technology, because it's not like, changing a Band-Aid or something like that. It's like you said in the beginning, there's a whole learning curve that has to go with these things. When we start a new piece of technology, it's not like we just get to power it on and it knows all the things. There's inputting data, there's connecting all the things to all the devices so that you know what's happening on those things, and it's learning what the cues are and what you have to do. And so when you think about changing technology, it really needs to match where you are currently with the tech that you have, but supersede that. And I have hopes with the implantable CGM that can be in the arm for like over a year, and oh my gosh, wouldn't that be wonderful?
Oh my God, so great.
But is that something that's going to be available to and possible for my daughter to get when she turns 18? Because I believe it's for 18 and above.
Okay.
Is that something that's going to work for her? And then, there's the smaller pumps, there's the tubeless ones, and it's like, will that work for her? Will that be comfortable? And, I I'm just reminded that we really do have to take things day by day
Yes.
and focus on the now. Yes, it's wonderful to know about those things. And if change is going to be good for you, that's wonderful. But we don't have to figure everything out now, despite wanting to.
I know. It's true. It is the case of, I wish I could hurry along. Or I wish I could look at a magic ball and see what's happening in the next 10 years or 20 years. So for yourself as a caregiver, you don't feel as, well, concerned, but also you'll feel a bit more sort of calm in the process as well, because the whole diagnosis, as you mentioned earlier, is a ripple effect upon the whole family. It's not just on the individual. And having everybody affected by it is sort of a shared, I don't want to use the word bereavement, but it is a sense of a ripple effect. But having a resource such as your book, as you've mentioned, makes it so much more accessible for those families that are currently being diagnosed, like literally like today.
Well, and I hope so, because, and like you said, there is a collective grieving.
Yes.
You know, when she was diagnosed at 7, I'm not sure that she really understood those things as deeply. She has, over time, become more aware of those things and the weight of it and the sorrow and the grief of those things. At 7, she was just excited to not feel like garbage anymore.
Yeah, because she was feeling quite groggy, wasn't she, before the diagnosis?
She was, and really, like, it was probably lousy, really lousy for a couple days, maybe half a week, maybe a week.
Okay.
But then by that time I was like, well, she's not doing well. I need to take her in.
Yeah.
But when I look back, I can see more and more symptoms.
Yeah.
Of course, in hindsight, but oldest child, I'm like, well, is this normal for her? I don't know, that she's never been this age before. And, but now as understanding those things, I can see them more. And yeah, but the parents and the grief doesn't just stop after a while. It gets, you understand and you learn how to deal with it. But there's every once in a while that it gets bumped again, and the grief is still there.
Yeah.
But there is so much more.
There's so much more life. Like, she's living. And that's the thing that I found a lot of my loved ones would look at when they would feel like super a bit low about it. I would say mostly my parents, but they would feel that, oh, look, she graduated, or she did this, or she's climbed up this crazy mountain in Australia. Like, they would just be like, okay, great. Like, she's living.
Yep.
So that's the kind of thing that, I mean, I don't know if it helps, but I would say has helped my parents feel that doesn't matter. Like, she still does it. Like, she may have to stop and have, an apple juice or a glucose tablet, or, something might happen like that. But eventually she'll do it,
Absolutely. And that's what, I never want to think, oh gosh, she did great and she has diabetes, right? It's she's doing great
just because.
Period, right?
Yeah.
But there are some times when there's moments during the day, and I'm not going to say there's been a whole day that I don't think about it, diabetes, but there are moments when life is happening and I don't think about it. And that's, the years that we have on this, it's the technology. But that, to me, I think has been an unknown goal. I didn't know that would feel so good, that I would go, oh my gosh, yeah, she has diabetes. Whoops. Because we don't want that to be the defining thing, right?
Exactly.
It happens to be something that we deal with, and we deal with frequently, multiple times a day, but it's not everything.
No. And the wonderful thing that I would say is, and what you mentioned earlier, because a lot of parents and caregivers, before their child has been diagnosed, similar to mine and similar to me as well, like, I had no idea about what the symptoms were. But at the back of your book, which I'll put online as well, there's literature, but there's also a really, like, I would say a really child but youth-friendly way of sort of explaining what it is, like what is type 1 diabetes. But then it goes to the section which is the common warning signs include, thirst, urination, fatigue. And some of these you might be thinking, it's just a teenager. Life is like that.
Yep.
But actually, if you put a couple together, could urge parents or caregivers or a sibling to go and take their loved one to a hospital or a clinic just to have a little blood test, see what happens, a bit of a urine test, which I think is super, super helpful at the end.
I did not feel, as the mother of a child with it who was blindsided by it, that I could not have that in there.
Yeah.
If this can help anyone notice symptoms in a loved one, because again, there's a fine line between having diabetes and being taken by diabetes. It isn't one of those long-term, I hope we figure it out kind of things. It needs to be figured out in a very timely way. And talking about those and making people aware really does go, oh, well, I have some of those, or my friend or my child. And to me, that's what I want. I want people to be aware so that no lives are lost to this, because you can live life with this and live a great life with this. But you've got to be able to find it first.
Of course. And just to sort of go on to sort of our penultimate part would be, what sort of advice would you give other parents specifically who have, I would say quite recently, have had a child who has been diagnosed? Is there any sort of key things that you would love to say to them?
It's such a good question. Well, first I would try to hug them.
Yes.
If they were willing, and I would probably hold them for an uncomfortable amount of time.
Yeah.
The love and the shared understanding that I have for them, for the situation that they are is deep. It's hard. It was world rocking. Like, I still think of the time, that she was diagnosed. There was the before and then there was the after. That's still a very defining thing. But what I would say to them is to take it day by day. It is very complicated. I'm getting around that. It's very complicated. It can be time consuming. It's overwhelming. But you have time to learn those things. So focusing on the basics, making sure that your child is functioning, that they are able to, I mean, again, I can remember my daughter just, when she got insulin in the hospital, and she's back to this sparkly thing that she always has been. And I remember just feeling dead inside, but noticing that she felt wonderful. And so there was a slight lift in that. Still felt dead for a long time after that. But just remember, you have time to learn those things, focus on the basics, and then continue to build your understanding of those, of the diabetes knowledge from there. But don't try to do it all in one day.
It's too much.
No, it's too much. I mean, even 10 years later, I'm like, really? That's part of this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, just, and to reach out for help, make connections with the people who've lived with it, who are, like, again, making connections that I've made connections with people who've lived with it, 40 years, 20 years, to be able to have those people in your life, to talk to you about things, to understand, is so beneficial, not only for the person who has it, but for the people that are taking care of them as well.
Beautiful. That was beautifully said, honestly. And the community is global.
Absolutely. And again, what a wonderful time when I want to feel bad about things, when I want to, have a pity party, I have to remind myself, not as a way of diminishing the way that I feel, but I have to remind myself, 100 years ago, my daughter wouldn't be here.
Absolutely.
50 years ago, the technology was awful. Even 40 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And to know that things are better and better for her. And they're only getting better. That's the hope.
That is it. Year by year. Absolutely beautiful. Well, I will say thank you and I will say goodbye. But I honestly do want to thank you so much for making the time and being a part of this, because I feel the more people that are aware of this book, especially across this side of the pond, I think the better.
Yes. Well, I really appreciate it. I will talk about Stephen and diabetes with literally anyone.
Good.
So thank you so much for asking me, and it was lovely talking to you.
Thank you so much to Amy for this fantastic book. Representation is absolutely key, and the more people we see wearing devices will definitely give others the confidence to show theirs off. I really, really hope that I can inspire others by wearing mine. And of course, if you're willing to have a chat about it, especially if you're non-diabetic, come and ask. Ask me what it is. Ask me how it works. I'm absolutely cool to talk about it. This podcast is written by me, Manisha Vidgama, and the producer is Matt Wareham. And of course, it's a Depictor production for Diabetes Squad.